I'm Dr. Judy Melanek. I'm a board-certified forensic pathologist, and I just watched the Nolan Wells press conference, and I wanted to share some context for everyone. Being able to definitively state the cause of death after a body has not been found for several days and has been subsequently autopsied twice with signs of decomposition is incredibly unlikely. Drowning is what's called a diagnosis of exclusion, which means that when you've got a fresh body, you want to be able to look at the body and see if there's any other causes of death for that body that is found in water that exclude the death being exclusively a drowning. So for example, if someone is shot and then thrown in the water, you'll have that gunshot and they'll be bleeding and the gunshot will be the cause of death, and the thrown in the water is not the cause of death. It's not even on the death certificate. If a person is strangled and they die from strangulation and then their dead body is thrown in the water, their body will take on water, but the cause of death is going to be strangulation, not drowning. Also for any kind of traumatic injuries. Now we got to talk about natural death for a second. If someone has a heart attack while they are swimming, and because they're having the heart attack as they're exercising in the water and they take on water and they drown, the cause of death is actually drowning, and the heart attack is listed on the death certificate under other significant conditions contributing to death. So even though the heart attack might have killed them on dry land, it might not have. Most certainly they wouldn't have drowned on dry land. So we defer to the hostile environment, which is the water, to call it a drowning. Now, identifying natural disease and identifying trauma is relatively easy in a fresh body. It can be very difficult in a decomposed body. His body was found 2 days after he disappeared, and this second autopsy done by Dr. Roger Mitchell wasn't until 4 days later. So we're dealing with quite a bit of decomposition, even if the body was refrigerated during that time. And then we have this other issue of the fact that not all the results are back. The toxicology would have been done on the fluids from the body from the first autopsy. From the second autopsy, you're going to have a lot higher alcohol levels from the decomposition caused by bacteria, not caused by drinking. So again, it's the fluid and blood from the first autopsy that really matter. And the other thing you have to consider, and there's one other important piece of information from that press conference, which is that the neck block, the portion of the neck from the front end, was missing. So Dr. Mitchell did not have a chance to examine that part of Nolan Wells' anatomy. Why is that important? Because if somebody is strangled, especially manual strangulation, the injuries are going to be to the front of the neck. There may be some redness at the back of the neck as well if, injury comes from behind, but generally this part of the neck doesn't have the major blood vessels and the airway. It's the front of the neck that does. So compression or damage to the front of the airway, that's going to be found in the neck block that is still sitting at the medical examiner's office that was not released with the body. So you may ask, is this common practice for pathologists to keep a portion of the anatomy with them at the medical examiner's office and not release it to the family? And the answer is yes. We will sometimes retain important specimens that have pathology in a jar under formaldehyde at the medical examiner's office for further examination or as evidence. And the absence of that neck block is really important because we still don't have information from the first autopsy that has not been released yet. So we don't know if it was kept out of an abundance of caution, meaning that it didn't have any findings and it was negative, or it was kept because it has findings, because there's a broken hyoid bone, or because there's hemorrhage in the strap muscles. Until we get that first autopsy report, we don't know why it's been retained. So why should anybody do a second autopsy? A second autopsy is often done in cases where there is a high-profile case such as this, or there is concern from the family for foul play, and they're just not getting answers from the medical examiner's office because the medical examiner's office is still doing their investigation and is keeping things under wraps, because if there is foul play, they have the evidence, they have the physical evidence that might be able to trap the killer, and they don't want to release that to the public. Even if there is no evidence of foul play, just the lack of evidence is evidence and is important information that might affect how people are interrogated, whether they're going to tell the truth or not the truth about what happened to him. You have to understand that the medical examiner's autopsy is legally mandated, and it is ultimately the most independent autopsy because it's not beholden to the family, it's not beholden to the prosecutor, to the police, to anybody else. It's an independent agency. So that is an independent autopsy, but it takes time. And it takes time until we get all the information back, including the toxicology report. And to answer the question, if somebody's intoxicated and they drown as a result of their intoxication, meaning that they're just, too intoxicated to be able to swim adequately, the cause of death would still be a drowning, but the intoxication would be considered a significant contributing condition. But because of what I said about alcohol forming from bacteria after death, if the body is decomposed, you have to subtract some of that alcohol because it may have been caused by bacteria and may not have been a sign of intoxication. And you can have up to 0.20 gram percent. So 0.08 is above the legal limit in most states for driving, but you can get up to 0.20 in a massively decomposed body. So it really throws you off when you have decomposition and alcohol to try to figure out whether there was alcohol on board or whether all of it's just been made by bacteria. So I hope this answers some questions about what I saw in the press.
For weeks now, one question has refused to go away. Was there something hidden inside Nolan Wells' final distress call that investigators and the public simply missed the first time? Or are millions of people listening to an edited version that only seems more revealing because modern technology has changed the way it sounds? At almost the same time that debate intensified, another topic quietly began drawing just as much attention: Nolan's autopsy. Some people believed the medical findings would answer the biggest questions in the case. Others wondered whether they would only create new ones. Today, we're taking a careful look at both. Not the rumors, not the dramatic headlines, but what public information actually tells us about the autopsy, the enhanced audio, and why investigators continue treating both with far more caution than many people online. If you followed this case from the beginning, you'll probably remember how quickly attention shifted from Nolan's disappearance to every tiny clue connected with his final known moments. Phone records, witness accounts, vehicle movements, digital activity, and eventually one short distress recording that would become one of the most replayed pieces of audio connected to the investigation. At first, many people assumed the recording would provide clear answers. Instead, it seemed to raise even more questions. Some listeners believed they heard multiple voices. Others insisted they could make out specific words. Still others said they heard nothing beyond wind, static, and a frightened voice struggling to be understood. As the recording spread across social media, enhanced versions soon appeared. Some claimed background noise had been removed. Others promised hidden voices had finally been uncovered. Several videos attracted enormous audiences in just a matter of days. But one important detail often disappeared beneath the excitement. According to publicly discussed information, investigators have not confirmed that the enhanced recordings circulating online represent official forensic versions used during the investigation. That distinction matters much more than many people realize. Modern software can do remarkable things. It can reduce wind noise, remove hiss, separate overlapping sounds, improve overall clarity. Those tools are valuable. But audio specialists also explain that aggressive processing can introduce new artifacts, sounds that were never clearly present in the original recording but begin to resemble speech after heavy filtering. Imagine looking through an old family photo album. One faded photograph has become almost impossible to recognize. A restoration expert sharpens the image. Faces become clearer. The picture looks better. But if important details were never captured by the original camera, restoration cannot magically recover information that never existed. Audio works much the same way. Enhancement can improve what is already there. It cannot reliably create missing facts. That simple reality has become one of the biggest talking points surrounding Nolan Wells. Meanwhile, another subject quietly entered the conversation: the autopsy. Whenever a high-profile investigation reaches that stage, many people naturally expect one document to explain everything: cause, timing, circumstances, perhaps even what happened during someone's final moments. Real investigations rarely work that way. An autopsy is one piece of evidence. An important piece, certainly, But investigators compare those medical findings with many other forms of evidence before drawing conclusions. Witness interviews, digital records, location data, search histories, physical evidence, surveillance footage. Every piece has to fit together. According to publicly available information discussed so far, authorities have continued assembling that larger picture rather than relying on any single dramatic development. That approach may seem slow from the outside, but experienced investigators often say patience prevents costly mistakes. As public attention remained fixed on the distress recording, something else happened online. People began comparing different enhanced versions against one another. One creator emphasized breathing sounds, another amplified lower frequencies. Someone else isolated what they believed were distant voices. Each version sounded slightly different. Not dramatically different, just enough to encourage different interpretations. One listener confidently identified a phrase. Another insisted those words simply were not there. A third heard something entirely different. Researchers who study speech perception have long noted that expectations influence what people believe they hear. If someone tells you a particular phrase appears inside an unclear recording, your brain naturally begins searching for exactly those words. Sometimes you'll hear them, even if another listener hears something completely different. That doesn't mean anyone is acting dishonestly. It simply reflects how human perception works. Professional forensic laboratories understand this well. That's why they carefully document every adjustment made during audio enhancement and preserve the untouched original alongside every processed version. Transparency matters. Without it, disagreement becomes almost inevitable. That same principle applies to medical evidence. Autopsy findings are interpreted within the broader context of the investigation. Investigators ask questions that go far beyond a single report. Where did this evidence come from? Can it be verified? Does it match the timeline? Does it support witness accounts? Does anything contradict it? Those questions may not produce dramatic headlines, but they often lead investigators closer to the truth. For Nolan's family and friends, however, every new theory likely carries emotional weight. Every viral video creates renewed hope for some people. Every bold claim creates frustration for others. Because ultimately, every theory must answer the same question. Can it be verified? That brings us back to the enhanced distress call. As weeks passed, attention gradually shifted away from what listeners believed they heard and toward a more important issue. Who actually created the version receiving the most attention? That answer became surprisingly difficult to establish. Copies spread rapidly across social media. Files were downloaded, edited again, reposted, shared without attribution. Eventually, tracing the original source became increasingly complicated. Investigators often describe this as a chain of custody problem. Without knowing exactly where a recording originated, who handled it, or how it changed over time, determining its evidentiary value becomes much more difficult. At first, that seems straightforward. Surely investigators would simply compare the enhanced version with the original, but that assumes everyone is talking about the same recording. Online, dozens of different versions now exist. Some promise hidden confessions. Others claim previously unheard voices. Still others suggest the audio completely changes the timeline. Yet investigators generally rely on controlled forensic procedures rather than publicly edited copies when evaluating evidence. That difference is easy to overlook, but it may explain why public discussion sometimes moves much faster than official investigations. And then another question quietly emerged. If the enhanced audio may not provide the certainty many people hoped for, could the autopsy reveal something the recording never could? Or would investigators discover that the real answers lie somewhere between the medical findings, the digital evidence, and the timeline itself? That's where the investigation takes another important turn. If you've been following this case from the beginning, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you believe enhanced recordings can genuinely help uncover the truth? Or should investigators rely only on evidence that can be independently verified? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments. And if you enjoy carefully researched, fact-based updates that separate verified information from online speculation, consider subscribing so you don't miss our next report. That brings us to one of the biggest misunderstandings surrounding this investigation. Many people have treated the autopsy and the enhanced distress call as if they answer the very same question. They do not. One attempts to explain medical findings, the other attempts to make a difficult recording easier to understand. Investigators rarely view either piece of evidence in isolation. Instead, they ask whether each one supports or conflicts with the broader timeline they have spent months building. That timeline has remained the backbone of the Nolan Wells investigation. Every confirmed phone record, every witness interview, every digital footprint, every location tied to Nolan's final known movements. Those pieces must fit together before investigators can confidently explain what happened. According to publicly discussed information, authorities have continued comparing digital evidence, interview transcripts, search records, and physical evidence collected during the investigation, rather than relying on dramatic moments circulating online. That may not sound exciting, but seasoned investigators often say, the quiet work produces the strongest results. Reviewing reports, comparing statements, checking timestamps, looking for inconsistencies. Sometimes the smallest contradiction leads to the most important discovery. At first, many people expected the enhanced recording to solve the mystery by itself. Instead, another debate emerged. Could artificial intelligence actually be making the public conversation more confusing? Only a few years ago, improving damaged audio required expensive software and highly trained technicians. Today, almost anyone can upload a recording into an AI-powered application that promises clearer voices within minutes. That accessibility has changed everything about how people consume evidence. Someone restoring an old family cassette may recover conversations they thought were lost forever. Historians may improve recordings made decades ago. Law enforcement laboratories can legitimately enhance difficult evidence under carefully controlled conditions. But the same technology also creates new challenges. Some AI systems don't simply reduce background noise, they estimate what speech might have sounded like. That difference is critical. Prediction is not the same as preservation. Professional forensic analysts repeatedly explain that processed recordings should always be compared with the untouched original because the enhanced version is only a tool, not a replacement for the evidence itself. That principle became increasingly important as more versions of Nolan's distress call appeared online. One creator emphasized breathing sounds, another isolated low-frequency noise. Someone else highlighted what they believed were distant voices. Each version sounded believable. Yet none sounded exactly alike. Imagine sitting around the kitchen table with 4 lifelong friends. You play the same unclear recording. Without giving anyone hints, you simply ask, "What do you hear?" One person says they hear someone calling a name. Another hears only wind. A third believes they hear footsteps. A fourth says they cannot distinguish any words at all. Now imagine telling everyone before pressing play, "Listen carefully. You'll hear someone say this exact phrase." Suddenly, many listeners begin hearing precisely what they expected. Psychologists have studied this effect for years. Expectation can shape perception. The brain naturally fills in missing information when sounds are incomplete. That's one reason investigators are often careful about releasing sensitive evidence while interviews are still underway. Witnesses generally want to help, but repeated exposure to public interpretations can unintentionally influence what people later remember. Meanwhile, another issue quietly gained attention: the origin of the enhanced recording itself. Who created the version receiving the most attention? The answer became surprisingly difficult to pin down. Copies spread rapidly across multiple platforms. Some were downloaded, edited again, uploaded under different names, shared thousands of times. Eventually, identifying the first version became almost impossible. Investigators often describe this as a chain of custody problem. If no one can confidently explain where a digital file originated or exactly how it changed over time, determining its evidentiary value becomes much more difficult. That challenge extends well beyond the Nolan Wells investigation. Courts across the country increasingly deal with altered photographs, edited videos, and digital recordings whose histories are difficult to verify. Forensic specialists therefore begin with one basic question: is the evidence authentic? Only then do they ask what it actually shows. Then something else caught investigators' attention. Not the voices, the background. When most of us listen to a recording, we naturally focus on speech. Investigators often do the opposite. Environmental sounds can sometimes reveal details people overlook: a passing vehicle, running water, bird calls, construction equipment, a closing door. Mechanical sounds often remain more consistent than partially understood speech. Former investigators speaking publicly about forensic audio in unrelated cases have noted that environmental sounds can sometimes provide stronger clues about timing and location than uncertain words ever could. If Nolan's distress call contains meaningful environmental sounds, investigators may learn something valuable. If those sounds prove insignificant, they simply move on to stronger evidence. Either result helps narrow the investigation. Around this same period, another familiar pattern emerged online. Every few days, dramatic headlines promised the mystery had finally been solved. This changes everything. Hidden confession uncovered. Case closed. People clicked. Videos spread. Then many viewers discovered that the underlying facts had barely changed. Only the presentation had. That cycle is not unique to this case. High-profile investigations often generate enormous amounts of discussion without producing the same amount of verified evidence. For families waiting for answers, that emotional cycle can be exhausting. Every notification raises hope. Every rumor creates expectations. Then another day passes without official confirmation. One friend involved in a long-term missing persons case reportedly described waiting itself as becoming its own burden. Not knowing can sometimes feel harder than receiving difficult news. Although every case is different, many families facing unresolved investigations have expressed similar feelings. While public attention remained fixed on the enhanced recording, investigators reportedly continued doing the work that rarely appears in headlines. Reviewing interview notes, checking timelines, comparing statements, looking for inconsistencies. Those quiet tasks may never go viral. Yet history shows they often produce the most reliable breakthroughs. Then another technical question surfaced. Some viewers believed pauses within the recording suggested editing. Others pointed out that mobile phone recordings frequently contain interruptions caused by signal loss, compression, or the recording device itself. Without access to the original recording and its metadata, reaching firm conclusions becomes extremely difficult. Metadata can answer questions long before anyone begins interpreting speech. When was the recording created? What device captured it? Has it been modified? Which software last saved the file? Unfortunately, much of that information disappears after repeated downloads and uploads across social media platforms. That is why investigators continue relying on original evidence rather than internet copies whenever possible. By now, the conversation had reached an interesting point. The enhanced recording remained one of the most discussed pieces of evidence connected to Nolan Wells. The autopsy continued drawing intense public interest. Yet, investigators appeared focused on something much broader: the complete timeline. Because if witness statements, digital records, medical findings, and physical evidence all point in the same direction, they become far more powerful than any single recording ever could. But if one part of that timeline refuses to fit, then investigators must determine whether they have uncovered an important clue or whether another piece of the puzzle is still missing. That unanswered question would soon shift attention away from the recording itself and back toward Nolan's final known movements, where one reported inconsistency continued raising difficult questions. By this point, one thing had become increasingly clear. The public conversation surrounding Nolan Wells had divided into two very different discussions. One centered almost entirely on the enhanced distress call. The other focused on the investigation itself. Investigators, however, rarely have the luxury of separating those conversations. Their responsibility is to examine every claim while keeping one standard above all others. Can it be verified? That question sounds simple. In practice, it is anything but. Every day, high-profile investigations generate new tips. Some come from witnesses. Others come from people who believe they noticed something overlooked. Many originate from social media posts that become more dramatic each time they are shared. Every lead has to be sorted. Every claim has to be checked. Every piece of evidence has to be measured against everything investigators already know. According to former investigators speaking publicly about major criminal cases in general, the evidence that ultimately matters most is often the least dramatic. A phone record confirming someone's location may carry more weight than a viral video watched millions of times. A witness remembering one overlooked detail can sometimes provide more value than hours of online speculation. Those realities rarely become headline news, but they often determine how investigations move forward. As attention slowly shifted back toward Nolan's final known movements, investigators reportedly continued comparing digital records with witness statements. That process may sound repetitive. In reality, it is one of the most important parts of any investigation. People remember events differently. Phones occasionally fail to record every movement. Technology has limitations. Human memory has limitations too. The objective is not to prove one source right and another wrong. It is to discover where independent sources overlap. When several unrelated pieces of evidence point toward the same conclusion, investigators gain confidence. When they do not, more questions follow. Experienced detectives often remind the public that contradictions do not automatically indicate deception. Two honest witnesses can remember the same afternoon differently. Stress affects memory. Distance changes perception. Lighting conditions influence what someone believes they saw. The passage of time can alter even sincere recollections. That is why investigators rarely draw conclusions from one inconsistency alone. Instead, they search for patterns that repeat across multiple sources. Meanwhile, the debate surrounding the enhanced distress call continued. Some listeners claimed they had discovered another hidden phrase. Others uploaded fresh comparisons intended to prove earlier versions had been manipulated. Again, the conversation returned to one technical issue: enhancement. Could software accidentally create sounds resembling speech? Audio engineers generally agree that aggressive processing can introduce artifacts, unintended sounds produced during digital editing. Those artifacts are not evidence. They are byproducts of processing. That distinction may seem subtle. In forensic work, it is essential. Without the untouched original recording available for comparison, confidently identifying genuine speech becomes much more difficult. For that reason, forensic laboratories typically preserve every version they create. The original remains untouched. Each processed copy is documented. Every adjustment is recorded. Transparency allows independent experts to understand exactly what changed and why. Without that transparency, disagreement becomes almost unavoidable. That careful documentation is one reason many observers have also looked toward the autopsy. Medical findings, unlike online speculation, are created using established forensic procedures. But even there, expectations can exceed reality. An autopsy is designed to answer medical questions. It does not automatically explain every circumstance surrounding a person's final hours. Investigators still compare those findings with everything else they have collected: digital records, witness interviews, location information, physical evidence. Only when those pieces begin supporting one another does a clearer picture emerge. As of the publicly available information reflected in this discussion, no official announcement has established that the widely shared enhanced distress call circulating online represents the definitive version accepted by investigators. Questions surrounding its origin, processing, and evidentiary value remain unresolved. That leaves the central question very much alive. Was the enhanced recording simply cleaned to improve clarity? Or has repeated processing influenced what listeners believe they hear? For now, there is no verified public answer. The same careful approach applies to the autopsy. Many online discussions suggest it answers every remaining question. Publicly available information does not support that conclusion. Instead, investigators continue treating every verified piece of evidence as one part of a much larger investigation. That approach can feel frustrating. Weeks become months, families wait, communities continue asking questions. Everyone hopes for certainty, but criminal investigations have always required patience. Long before smartphones, long before artificial intelligence, long before anyone could upload an audio file and enhance it with a single click. One principle has remained unchanged. Evidence does not become stronger because more people believe it. Truth is established through verification. That principle has guided investigators for generations, and it continues to shape modern cases involving digital evidence. The Nolan Wells investigation has also become a reminder of how quickly technology can influence public opinion. Today, photographs can be altered convincingly. Videos can be edited almost seamlessly. Voices can be cleaned, filtered, isolated, and even imitated with astonishing realism. Those developments create remarkable opportunities. they also create significant responsibilities. For investigators, for journalists, for content creators, and for everyone watching from home. The strongest conclusions still come from facts that can be independently confirmed. Everything else deserves careful scrutiny. For Nolan's family and friends, that distinction is more than a technical discussion. It represents the difference between hope and certainty, between rumor and evidence, between speculation and answers that can withstand careful examination. As more official information becomes publicly available, investigators will continue comparing every finding against the broader timeline. If the autopsy aligns with digital records, witness statements, and physical evidence, confidence grows. If something does not fit, investigators keep searching until they understand why. That methodical process may not satisfy those hoping for immediate answers. History has shown that it often produces the most reliable ones. The enhanced distress call may remain one of the most talked about aspects of the Nolan Wells case. The autopsy may continue drawing public interest, but neither should be viewed in isolation. Together with every verified record, every confirmed timeline, and every carefully examined piece of evidence, they form parts of a much larger puzzle that investigators are still working to complete. Until more official findings are released, many of the biggest questions remain unanswered. And while speculation will almost certainly continue, the facts that ultimately matter will be the ones that investigators can independently verify. If you've followed the Nolan Wells investigation from the beginning, we'd genuinely like to hear your perspective. Do you think modern technology helps uncover the truth in cases like this? Or has it made separating fact from speculation more difficult? Please keep the conversation respectful in the comments, because thoughtful discussion benefits everyone following the case. And if you appreciate carefully researched updates that focus on verified information instead of rumors, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll continue following this investigation and bring you new developments as they become publicly available.